All right, so today in this lesson, we are going to review independent and dependent variables. So an independent variable doesn't change, it stands alone. You'll remember that from science. We talked a lot about that in science. And a dependent variable is changed by what happens with the independent variable. Now, as we're talking about this, hopefully you're getting lesson 31 out. We're going to do some of these together, and then some I'm going to have you do on your own, and we'll do exactly what we did last week, then we'll go over them. All right, so back to independent and dependent variables. So an independent variable stands alone. A dependent variable changes by what happens with the independent variable. So to give a practical example of what I'm talking about, an independent variable would be the time you spend studying for a test. That can change your test score. So however much you study will depend on your test score. So the independent variable would be time studying, and the dependent variable would be your test score. All right, so other things could depend on that too. For instance, like the amount of sleep you have, that could be an independent variable. How hungry you are when you go into the test, that could be an independent variable. So there are a lot of things that could affect that test score. So today we're going to be using independent and dependent variables in order to create a table. And we have to remember, and we learned this in science, that the independent variable has no constraints, and when we create a table, we're going to be placing the independent variable in the first row or the first column, and the dependent variable then will go over here. So I'm going to just make a little note of that to remember independent, dependent. That'll just be a little note to remind. So as we're reading this first example, I want to identify the independent and the dependent variable before I start filling in the table. All right, so here it goes. Marcus reads for 30 minutes each night. He wants to determine the total number of minutes he will read over the course of a month. He wrote the equation T equals 30D to represent the total number of time that he has spent reading, where T represents the total number of minutes and D represents the total number of days that he read during the month. Determine which variable is independent and which is dependent. Then create a table to show how many minutes he has read in the first 7 days. So I just read this part to you. All right, so I've got to determine the independent variable. Well, when I'm looking up here, the independent variable, the thing that doesn't change is the number of days. So I'm going to find that in here. I've got number of days, and that's going to be independent. And then my dependent variable is the total of minutes read. So my independent variable is the total number of minutes read. All right, so I'm going to put number of days for the independent variable. And the thing that changes or could change or could depend upon would be the total number of minutes. So if he skips a day, it will change the total number of minutes. So that's why the number of days would be the independent variable, and then the total number of minutes would be the dependent variable. Okay, so in the first column here, because we have the independent variable and we know that it goes in the first column, we're going to put number of days, and they wanted the number of days to be represented by D. All right, so the dependent variable would be total minutes read, total minutes read, and they wanted the total minutes read to be, okay, so the total minutes read, we're going to leave it like that for right now. So it says Marcus reads for 30 minutes each night. So for the first day, he reads 30 minutes. I know that by the information. So if the total minutes read each day is 30, we could represent that by saying 30D, because each time it goes up by 30 minutes. So since I know 30 times D is going to give me the answer here, if he reads 2 nights, okay, 30 times 2, remember I'm replacing the 2 with, I'm replacing the D with the 2, and now I've got 60 minutes. Well, what if he reads 3 nights? I'm replacing the D, so that gives me 90. All right, I noticed something here. I notice I'm counting by, now if I take the 0 off, I notice I'm counting by 3s. I've got counting by 30s. So if I do 4 days of reading, it'll be 120. 4 times 30 is 120. 5 days of reading would be 150. 6 days of reading would be 180. 7 days of reading would be 210. So when I was setting up this table, I looked for the independent and the dependent variables first in order to set up the table. So I noticed that the independent variable, which changes, and so the independent variable is what changes the dependent variable, and the number of days that he reads changes the number of minutes. Now, if he were to skip a day, then he would have that many less minutes than at the end of the month. All right, so let's go on to the second example. And the second example is about Kira. Kira designs websites. She can create 3 different websites each week. Kira wants to create an equation that will give her the total number of websites she can design given the number of weeks she works. Determine the independent and dependent variables. Create a table to show the number of websites she can design for the first 5 weeks. Finally, write an equation to represent the number of websites she can design when given any number of weeks. All right, so how do we determine which is the dependent and independent variable? Well, I'm going to look here, and I'm going to look at this information again in order to determine that. Because the number of websites she can make, so number of websites, depends on the number of weeks worked, I determine that the number of weeks worked was the independent variable, and the websites designed is the independent variable. So the number of websites will change depending on the number of weeks. So we're going to say number of weeks is independent. Number of weeks. But the number of weeks that she works, it depends, so that's the dependent variable, on the number of websites. All right, so then we know that the independent variable goes in the first column. So we've got number of weeks, and we'll put that as W. And then we have number of websites, and we'll mark number of websites as D because she's designing the websites. All right, so does knowing which is the independent and which is the dependent help you write the equation? Well, it will help us write the equation. when we get that far. And we need to look at the relationship between the number of weeks and the number of websites. So at the end, we can write the equation. All right, so if she worked 1 week, now let's go back up to the information. It says that create a table to show the number of websites she can design over 5 weeks. So I already know that I'm going to be designing this for 5 weeks, the first 5 weeks. Okay, so if she can create 3 websites each week, 3 websites, so for week 1, she's got 3. So for week 2, she's got 6. I'm noticing a pattern. So 3 weeks would be 9, 4 weeks would be 12, and 5 weeks would be 15. So, what would the pattern be? Well, I notice that if I take the number of weeks, W, and I multiply that times 3, I get the number of designed websites. So, my equation would be the number of weeks times 3 gives me the number of designed websites. So let's make sure this works. So I've got 3 times W. So if I plug 1 in here, 1 times 3 gives me 3. 2 times 3 gives me 6. 3 times 3 gives me 9. 4 times 3 gives me 12. And 5 times 3 gives me 15. So this equation works the way I have it written. So we used the relationship of the independent and the dependent variable in order to write the equation. All right, now we're going on to number 3. Priya streams movies through a company that charges her $5 a month plus $1.50 per movie. Determine the independent and dependent variables. Write an equation to model the situation and create a model to show the total cost per month given that she might stream between 4 and 10 movies in a month. All right, a lot of information there. So first of all, we need to figure out the independent and the dependent variables. All right, so the independent variable would be the number of movies because we've already got the number of movies in there. The number of movies watched per month. Okay, now the reason we have that as the independent variable is because that will determine the cost. So how many movies that she rents or streams will determine the cost of how much she'll owe at the end of that month. So the independent variable will be the number of movies watched. And the dependent variable, what depends on the number of movies watched, is the total cost. Okay, so remember, I'm taking the independent variable and I'm putting that in the first slot. All right, number of movies watched, and I'm going to put an M for number of movies watched, and then the total cost. So we'll do total cost, and we're going to, for the letter for that, we're going to make that C for cost, total cost. So we've got movies, M, total cost, C. So we know it says here streaming between 4 and 10 movies in a month. So that must be the range that she usually streams movies. So we already know that those are the values that we're going to place in our independent variable part of the chart. So 5 movies, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So now we've got some variation here, or I should say 2 parts to it, because the movies that she streams, they charge her $5 monthly fee plus $1.50 per movie. So we already know that she's going to be charged $5 no matter what. And then $1.50 per movie. So if she streams 4 movies, then she streams 4 movies. She's already got a $5 cost. So $5 plus $1.50 per movie. Well, that would be $1.50 times 4. Okay, so that would be 0, 20. That would be 4, 5, 6. So that would be $6 for the movies. So we've got $6 for the movies and $5 for the monthly fee. So that would be a grand total of $11 cost for 4 movies. Now, what if she streamed 5 movies? Well, how's that going to change the overall? So I've got my baseline with my $11. So what's going to be the difference between this and the 4 movies and the 5 movies? Well, if I go back up here, the monthly cost isn't going to be any greater. It's only going to be adding another $1.50 for the extra movie that she watched. So I'm going to be adding another $1.50, which would be $12.50. So after I've done this original calculation, then I'm just going to go up $1.50 each time. That might be a key to the equation. So if I add another $1.50 to the $12.50, $1 would be $13.50, and then 50 cents more would be $14. So for 6 movies, she would be charged $14. Well, if I add another movie, I'm adding another $1.50, so that's going to be $15.50. Add another movie, add another $1.50, that would be $16.50, and then 50 more cents, which would be $17. All right, add another movie, add another $1.50, $18.50. Add another $1.50, that would be $19.50, and then add the 50 cents, and that would be $20. So I'm noticing each time we add another $1.50. So the total cost equals the amount of the monthly fee plus $1.50 times the amount of movies. So if I were to write this out, and I'll go ahead and write this out. So it would be the cost of the movies equals the $5, and that would be the monthly fee, plus the $1.50 per movie. And the M stands for movie. So let me take this, and if I put my 4 in here, I have my $1.50 times 4, which gives me my $6, plus the $5, which gives me the $11. So if I put 5 in there for 5 movies, and I multiply times $1.50 and add the $5, I get the $12.50. So this equation matches the information from my chart. All right, so I have 2 problems, 2 exercises that I want you to try. They're just like this. Don't get frustrated because we're going to check them together before I give you an assignment. All right, so if you have any questions, please email me or send me a message through Remind, and I will get back to you. And I just want you to do your best and make sure you're looking for that independent and dependent variable, because that'll help you set up your chart. Remember, independent and then dependent. All right? You guys will do a great job. Keep watching, keep learning.